I am Tim Miller, and I work in Avalonia, and I'm going to be talking about bringing .NET MAUI to Linux and WebAssembly through Avalonia. Now, for information about me, I worked at Xamarin in late 2014 and went through with the acquisition to Microsoft, and worked on various parts of mobile device tooling, Visual Studio, reorgs, lots of things happened in that time, until about June of this year, and then I started working for Avalonia. And with that, we get to one of the projects I started to work on, which is this. And so for this, not this way. There we go. To go over, we're going to go over briefly what .NET MAUI is and how the core handlers and layout system works, which are the biggest things that we're doing with Avalonia here. What Avalonia brings to .NET MAUI, we're going to skip the demo, but we're going to show off some of the new stuff that we did in the past few weeks since the .NET Conf announcement of what we're doing, and the current progress, issues, and when does it come out. Do want to talk about when we're going to try to ship it. So first, .NET MAUI is the .NET multi-platform app UI. It is the cross-platform framework for creating native mobile tooling with a single code base through C# and XAML. And it started as Xamarin Forms, and which based on Mono, and then when they, I think it was .NET 6 was the first release, they decided that they wanted to redo their systems and make some architectural changes. And with that, they created MAUI. It is on iOS, Mac OS through Catalyst because it's bound to UIKit, Android, and WinUI 3 for Windows. And the way MAUI works architecturally for its control system is that it has this concept called handlers. So what it does is you have an abstract, virtualized set of buttons and iButtons, which are the core platform layer type primitives, things like that, checkboxes, whatever. And with that, it goes through a handler system where it binds it to the virtual button to a platform-based one. So it's a factory for creating native controls out of virtual ones. And so for like iOS, it would be UI button, Android, material button, Windows, et cetera. And the idea, though, is that you can take those virtualized views and through the handlers, you can create whatever you want through it. So like in their case, they bind to native controls for the platforms they target. You can target additional platforms, like they also have like Tizen. I think they still do. It's one of them. But like, the idea being that you can target whatever, if they wanted to do a new platform, they could do it. But you can also change out the implementation, theoretically, with something else. So if you wanted to do, say, drawing controls, that's a possibility. And so code-wise, this is what it ends up looking like. So this is from the MAUI repo. You have a list of the, separated out between the platforms. So each of the CS files would be for, the individual platform, and then the interface for handling it. There's way more that goes into the actual handler code because there's mappers, all sorts of stuff we don't have to get into. But the key is that there is an I button, the virtual view, and then a platform view, which consists of all of the native implementations. And some of you, if you're maybe thinking ahead, like this actually will become slightly an issue later on for us. But point being of like when you run a MAUI app on iOS, it uses a UIKit button. It is hard-coded specifically. It will always be a UI button. Likewise for all the other platforms. And then standard platforms, it becomes just a generic object. It can be whatever you want it to be. So the other thing that's important to talk about is layout. And so layout is a similar concept where they have an implementation for a interface iLayout handler. And those are the things that drive the standard like layout systems for like grid, stack layout, flex, et cetera. And the way it's an interesting idea for how they did it because these don't necessarily bind to a native platform implementation. So like when you have a, like WinUI has a stack layout, but MAUI doesn't use its stack layout for generating their stack layout. Like they use a framework element on Windows and then lay out everything exactly the way it should be through native controls, but they handle all of the binding to make it so the layout works through these interfaces and stuff. And so by doing that, one is they don't have to necessarily bind to a platform that doesn't have the control. They can just do it themselves. But it also means that because they give exact coordinates and they say this is how everything should look, makes sense that if you can just give it coordinates and have something render it out, it shouldn't be too hard to implement it yourself. So what Avalonia and .NET bring to this is that it's completely redoing all of the base level handlers for MAUI. So instead of it being a UI kit button or in material button or whatever, it's going to be an Avalonia one. For all of the standard controls, every single thing that is inside of the MAUI repo when you start an app, that would be a drawn control from Avalonia. So what that means is that theoretically, if you were just using the standard base controls, everything that's baked into MAUI today, like you did .NET New MAUI or you have just standard apps, your existing code would just work. Obviously limitations if you have native code or you have specific considerations for integrating stuff, but for the most part, if you're just using standard MAUI-based controls, you wouldn't have to do anything. It should just work. And it would also theoretically allow for people to create their own drawn handlers and replace them within native ones. So if you have if you wanted to replace some stuff with drawn stuff and some stuff with native, there are theoretically ways for us to be able to handle that as well. For the moment, we're talking here about Linux and WebAssembly because those are the two target platforms that MAUI doesn't actively, or they don't support at all. But what we're going to show is that you could do this with any platform Avalonia targets. You don't have to just use Linux or WebAssembly with this. You could do anything now and in the future. If Avalonia supports it, this project should as well. There's no technical reason why it couldn't. So why are we doing it? For .NET MAUI, it's because it's to bring support for platforms people want. For MAUI, Linux is probably one of the most requested features, apart from having a designer, that people want out of .NET MAUI. And it's an extremely hard ask for that team because what is Linux? What does Linux support for a native framework mean? It's hard. It's what do you use? You want to use GTK? Do you want to use Qt? You can. Where are you going to end up targeting and having to now build those controls for every platform on top of everything else they already have to do is a huge ask. And so it's understandable why they would be reluctant to want to do that. For Avalonia, what this ends up bringing for us, why we do it, is because we have we want to enhance our framework to create new controls for things that we haven't traditionally supported very well. So mobile controls, things that MAUI can exceed at because their strength is in mobile. For this project to make sense, we have to now support what MAUI can do. And so that means building more support out for all of those things swiping and gesture management, navigation views, things that Avalonia, being more desktop oriented in how it's implemented, how people think of it, hasn't needed to do before. So now this means that we're going to have a lot more rich controls for things that Avalonia traditionally hasn't. And for bringing new users into Avalonia to say that if you want to create controls for MAUI, but you also don't want to necessarily build out complete custom controls for every single platform, MAUI already has MAUI graphics. They have a layer for doing drawn graphics. But with Avalonia, you can also get the benefit of if you do that, then you can also support Avalonia straight as well. So there are ways to bring more people in to do more cross-platform development, as I see it. And so, for example, since the demo, this is from Javier, who we just got from the MAUI team a few weeks ago, and he's on a tear creating new stuff. So this isn't in the from the blog, the current post. But he's started implementing swipe controls for swipe layouts, And we also have activity indicator controls. So there is a progress bar. This is actually like, these are like the APIs and like design ideas for these are things that I think he's already introduced into the like as PRs, as specs for Avalonia to talk about, like, because there's implementations and stuff. But the idea here being is that we want to bring this stuff directly into Avalonia and say, like, to make it complete. And we're going to skip the demo, but you can talk to me afterwards if you want to see it, because I have this running live. But one of the apps, like, I've been porting apps, and so we're trying to like go through all of the early MAUI examples and go through it chronologically as it evolves. Like, there's new controls, new things that it adds, and so we're going through to see if we can get like all, like, going back to .NET 6 and going up to make sure that everything still works and we didn't break anything. And so this was Weather 21, which launched with .NET 6. Like, this was one of their demos, and working on Linux and WebAssembly. The neat thing about this is that all of the icons and stuff you see on the screen, those are SVGs. And what MAUI does is they have this thing called Resizer, which you give it a bunch of images or fonts or whatever, and then it takes those and turns it into native, like, stuff that gets inserted into the application. MAUI can then render it, and then that's how it shows up. We are hooking into the exact same code for that. So when you run the same like build system out of MAUI, when you use MAUI in your app, like, it will turn it into Avalonia resources and then get referenced the exact same way. So this, in order to build this XAML, like everything for this app, there is no code change. It is the exact same MAUI app. Like, the only difference is that the platform is different because it's Avalonia, and like functionally speaking, that's it. And you also have like flex layouts and stuff too. It's neat. And to get back to it, this is the same app from Avalonia running on Windows and Mac OS. So you can, it's not just, to say it again, it's not just Linux or WebAssembly. We can also do this on Windows and Mac OS too. And it will look essentially exactly the same because it's drawn. And to hammer that point home, this is Avalonia running on Mac OS again. And on the other side, we have it running natively with Mac Catalyst. And so when I took this, it was kind of funny because like it more or less looks the same except for the nav bar on the left side, which is a shell icon and like, it's set up. And this is running on Mac OS 26 and with .NET 10, like the newest version. But this isn't really a bug in MAUI. Like, and I'm not pointing this out just because it's a bug, like, because it's weird. It's like, it's not a MAUI bug per se, but it's because Mac OS 26 made changes for how it lays out UI, and so how it does positioning and stuff. Like, that menu is hard-coded to be 67 pixels. And so that's where it's positioned. And so, but because of other considerations in the UI, that's what then breaks it, and then it does stuff. Where with Avalonia, it will look, theoretically, as long as you can still build it on the platform and deploy it, should hopefully be exactly the same no matter when you run it. It should, like, this is the same code running in the same place. So for the current issues we have, stuff we're working through is, excuse me, .NET MAUI internal infrastructure. So in order to do this project, like, there's stuff in MAUI that's required. If you wanted to build your own implementation for MAUI and do this type of work, there are internal interfaces that are not public that you would need to handle, like app lifecycle, alert management, like stuff that, like, when designing it, they wanted people to be able to build their own platforms, but like things happen and, you're trying to do stuff. And so there are things that if you want to do it, they have to be open. Now, for the sake of what we're doing right now, we have ways around that. Thanks to Rosalind analyzers and stuff, like we can say, oh, this is internal. Well, we're going to make it public for our sake. But that's not really a solution to this problem. But our goal would be to open up stuff and make it so that anybody can build on top of it. And then for .NET Target Framework, so to go back to what I was saying before, like, I showed Linux and WebAssembly, and that's our focus because Maui doesn't support that itself. It's a standard target framework. Likewise, with Avalonia, we target we target the standard framework for Windows and Mac. Like, you don't bring in the SDKs. If you do, though, then Maui will explicitly call out iOS, Android, and et cetera. And so if you try to bind a new handler for, say, iOS or whatever, it expects a UI button. You can't replace it with any other control. It has to be a UI button, or it will throw and it will not like you. It will hate you for doing it. And there is realistically no way around that without having to re-architect the platform to make it not do that. And so that is something we have to figure out with them. But they are interested in figuring out this problem. And on the one hand, I understand why they would do it this way, because it makes it easier as a developer to know which control maps to what, and you don't have to cast it. On the other hand, you literally cannot change the control if you're on iOS or Android. And there's no technical reason why Avalonia couldn't work on those platforms. It's just because it's hard-coded to this. So that's something we have to figure out. Likewise, again, we're working on standard controls and implementing the entire stack. There's stuff to think about regarding Skia, Sharp, Maui Graphics, Avalonia, and Impeller, because we announced the Impeller stuff. And right now, one of the nice things about this project is if you're already using Maui Graphics for building out Drawn UI, which a lot of vendors do, like Syncfusion, I think, and a lot, because it makes sense, they would want to use drawn controls for their UI, because then they don't have to implement it on every platform. If you're already using Maui Graphics, then it should just work with Avalonia, because we wrote the mapper to just take those things and run it, because Avalonia already uses Skia Sharp. And so it's streamlined. If you're already using it, it should work. But if Avalonia uses Impeller as its backend, then that creates an interesting situation of how we figure out, okay, well, now you have multiple things, what can we expect? And something to think about for the future. It's on our mind. And also figuring out that third-party story for integration. We want to figure out, we're driving the effort to get it so anybody can do these types of integrations on their own. So, if you wanted to add your own implementation into the Maui repo, create your own framework, you should be able to. Anything we do inside of Maui, there will be no Avalonia-specific code. We are not asking for anything Avalonia-specific for this project. Everything we're doing in their repo is to open up stuff so that we can do this work, but we're not doing anything for ourselves. This is all for the community. So figuring out other areas of Avalonia that need to be advanced, navigation, collection views, and stuff. Basically, the things that work in Maui or exist there that don't exist in Avalonia. Another example would be images. Maui supports having URIs for images. It will download images. Avalonia doesn't do that. Those are things we have to think about. And then, figuring out third-party controls and ABI compatibility. So trying to see, we don't know if, obviously, if you have a third-party control that's native and you try to use it here, it won't work. But what happens in that situation? Should it throw, or should it, we need to make sure that people have ways of either working around it or making it so they can add their own implementations on top of it. Or how do vendors or other people or community people make sure that they can support native controls and Avalonia controls and try to extend it out? So we're still trying to figure that out. And then when? So the goal is that we want to target .NET 11. So to get a stable release out for the open source, right now the repo is closed source. We want to open it when .NET 11 Preview 1 comes out, when Maui's preview comes out. Maui tries to ship with their previews with .NET. Sometimes it slips, things happen. But we're trying to get it so we can sync along with them and get this work out as they do. And then obviously nightly builds, we're gonna iterate on it. And every time Maui has a release for their previews, we want to have something available as well, so then other people can follow along. But of course, a lot can happen in that time, so I don't want to hold it to it. The goal, again, no internal hacks in Maui. no forks, we're not going to do anything like with Maui itself to make this work. So it better work straight with whatever version of Maui you bring in. Making sure the controls are good and top notch. Like if it's bad, then yeah, we don't want to make that stable. Like we can wait. There's no reason to push it out. Making sure existing apps can feasibly be ported. So obviously, like one of the reasons why I was really like, we cannot publish this right away is because I know the millisecond we open source it, everybody's going to try to do whatever Maui app they can find and get it to run on Linux or WebAssembly, which is great. But then you're going to get bugs and it's going to be just a lot of things like churn, and we don't want that. And so like making sure that we can try to, like if you have an existing Maui app and you want it to run on these platforms, you should be given a chance. So we want to make sure that we give you a nice, easy path to getting that to work. And also Avalonia 12 and binding work back into repo. So like we want to add controls into Avalonia, targeting version 12, and then seeing like how much of that work can we get into Avalonia versus having it be separated into this Maui specific stuff. Like the goal would be anything we can get into Avalonia directly, we want to do. And yeah, that's all I got. So thank you.
非常感谢这个 Tim Miller 给我们带来这个精彩的演讲。接下来有10分钟的这个 Q&A 的时间，我们有请这个 Avalonia 在中国这个总经理董老师，然后进行跟那个大家和这个 Tim Miller 进行一些交互。 然后大家有什么问题啊，可以踊跃的发言，或者有些想法呀，都可以。接下来的时间呢，我们交给董老师。
如果大家有什么问题的话，需要翻译的话，可以我来翻译啊。Yeah, please.
我用英语还是中文？
都可以。
You know, every platform to compatible with Avalonia is difficult, and you have to abandon some specific control or not common control. Do you have any difficulty to specify every platform in the developer? 我的意思是说那个
Okay, yes. So for the sake of this stuff we have here, the way it works is we target, so Avalonia apps in our case target .NET straight. So there's no target frameworks, separation, things like that. And so for Linux, there isn't a target framework. For WebAssembly, there isn't. There's browser, that would be the target framework. For the other projects that we're talking about, like theoretically you can bring in the SDK if you wanted to do platform-specific stuff. There is another side, actually I should have brought it up in these slides too. There is a side of Maui with Maui essentials for platform-specific like code implementations, things like that. That's another consideration thing we have to figure out because again, like how would that work in our platform and making it work, we don't know. But I would say, yeah, I think.
我想再问一个问题，就是我看到门口有 Harmony OS 和那个龙芯的适配嘛，那我想问一下，就是到真正的生产级别，预计有什么计划或者是时间表吗
Okay, that question is actually not for you because he's asking for Lawson and Harmony OS.
Yeah.
这个因为跟这场比较无关，我只能非常简短的回答一下。龙芯已经是生产可用了，鸿蒙的话，今年年末会有更多消息。
好嘞，谢谢。
I would say though, having not knowing what you said, but I would say like, as I said before though, anytime, if Avalonia can target a platform, there's nothing stopping this project from working. So as long as you are able to build an Avalonia app, if there is a future platform development, then this could work fine. There is nothing stopping that.
因为 Avalonia 其实可以面向所有的平台，所以没有任何理由阻止 Avalonia 向另外一个平台适配。 我们还有其他的问题吗？Should I mention that you have a lab demo here so people can? Should I mention you have a lab demo here? 实际上我们现场准备了这个贸易运行的这个实际的 demo， 如果大家有兴趣的话，可以来找 team 来体验一下。
怎么样体验呀？就是那个
是待会儿到下面去找他。
哦，下面找他。
对。OK， 还有其他问题吗？
我很好奇，就是说现在这个新的设计的话，它那个 UI 和那个就是 style 就类似 CSS 这样，它有做很好的一个结尾嘛？就比如说现在还是一个跨平台的，那么它可能在不同的平台，它又需要适配不同的一个风格，它可能要定制不一样的那种类似这样的 style 的这种，它有做这方面的结尾。
Do we have a decoupling of the styles in different platforms because they may look different?
So yes, that should work. So the way it works in Maui is its build files dictate it has device specific ones for mobile, desktop, whatever, and then it has the platform specific ones. Those should be able to be extended so we could add whatever additions for, say, if you want to add Linux equal or whatever. So if you wanted to have Linux specific styles or browser specific styles, yes, that should be absolutely supported. There shouldn't be a technical reason why that couldn't work. Basically anything the biggest considerations are if you're targeting an already existing UI platform like iOS, Android, etc., those will have difficulty because of how Maui is architected. But if you're targeting, for these specifically, Linux and WebAssembly, that's why we're targeting Linux and WebAssembly first, because we can add new stuff to that and make it work. We can't do it if you're already on iOS or something like that. That's where the problems start.
就是贸易这边的话，它会在不同的平台有属于自己的这个跟样式相关的东西，只是在各个平台都要单独设计的。那对于已经有的平台，比如说 iOS 和安卓这种平台的话，那Avalonia 想做它的 backend 的话，现在还是会有一些难度的，因为就是它是在那个平台上的实现。但是对于我们此刻我们所做的这个项目，在 Linux 和 WebAssembly 上的话，那因为它本身没有任何的实现，所以我们可以加我们想加的东西。
我想问一下，就是 Avalonia UI 就是在安卓和 iOS 上面的话，就是如果我想做一个安卓 iOS 的 app， 那现在推荐是直接用 Avalonia 框架呢，还是用 Avalonia based on 那个MAUI？
对不起，突然意识到刚才有一段话没有翻译，就是关于平台特定的特性，就是MAUI Essential 这个平台，它就是可以去解决大家在各个平台上要做 native 的交互的问题。So the question is basically about if we want to make a mobile app in .NET, do you recommend the Avalonia itself or Avalonia MAUI?
So what I would say is if you want it's a good question. I would say if you're working on a new application, never started one before, my first recommendation is you should really check out Avalonia. That would be the right one to use first because it already supports everything and you don't have to do any of this weird stuff. It just works. So you can already target it for Linux, WebAssembly, and iOS, and Android, and all of those right now. The advantage for this is that for a lot of customers, they depend on Microsoft tooling. Microsoft's name means a lot. And so they want to use that and they don't want to be swayed by anything else. This is an effort to get people onto maybe a happier path and say hey, here, we can give you Linux and WebAssembly. And also, hey, you should really check out this other platform. We can already do this. You don't have to do anything. So again, it's a nice glide path into maybe persuading people who wouldn't have been persuaded before, hey, you can do it. And also, again, if you can see this work, just use Avalonia. You can just do it straight. So yeah, this is that's another way of seeing it as a glide path into Avalonia.
那如果是一个全新的项目的话，那我们当然还是推荐用 Avalonia 来做，因为我们已经有了所有的构建一个移动应用的所需要的所有的东西。那之所以我们还要做这个项目，就是这个贸易的后端，那主要是因为对于有些企业来说，他们还是非常依赖微软的工具链。微软这个名字在他们项目中出现，对于他们来说是一件很重要的事情。那从这个角度来考虑的话，可能做这件事情是有意义的。但是同时你可以看到，你通过贸易的 Avalonia Backend 所做的这些事情，那用 Avalonia本身其实也可以做到。那为什么不直接用 Avalonia 呢？
Also, one more thing to mention is I'm speaking for myself, not for Avalonia as of.
这是他的个人观。
To say, I don't want to my boss is here. Yeah. I don't want to speak for, but that's how I see it personally. That's how I see it.
这是他的个人观点，不代表公司的观点。
Giving myself liability. Yeah.
你好，我问一个问题啊，就是我这块有一个蛮大的这种面向于这种医疗领域的这种 OneForm 写的这种程序，然后我们现在是也想把它放到这种统信啊这种 Linux 上面来运行，然后如果要迁移到这个 Avalonia 上的话，就是有什么样的一个建议一个路径，这样就是比较高效啊，这个低成本的这种方式啊。
This question is a little bit for Mike. So he has a really giant WinForm application for medical industry, and it's WinForms, and he wants to migrate to Avalonia. Is there anything he need to pay attention before doing the actual job? What? 今天暂时没有什么可以分享的内容，但是我们确实已经接触过很多客户在做这样的事情了。对。这是大家比较共性的一个问题啊。还有其他问题吗？
像Avalonia的话，你也只是说。目前做的项目只是说把 Linux 跟 WebAssembly 的话接管过去，但后面的其他平台，比如说Windows 平台的话，后端渲染是不是Avalonia会愿意想接过去呢？对。
So do you also have some plans to work on the Avalonia backend for MAUI on Windows?
Yeah, I mean, so when we open source it, like when it comes out, like we're talking about Linux and WebAssembly, but you can run this on Windows and Mac and anything else Avalonia target. We're not going to stop you from running it. That said, it's not like if there are more issues with that, MAUI itself already targets that. So you can use that and, probably be perfectly happy, I guess. but our focus is on the platforms MAUI itself doesn't target. But we're saying that it will work. Like you should be able to run it fine. We want it to work. But our focus right now is on the newer platforms that MAUI itself doesn't target.
OK， 这个当然是可以支持的，因为我们马上把它开源之后，你可以把它去尝试在各个平台上运行。只是我们现在的主要的精力是放在了MAUI没有办法支持的平台上。
And also to say too, it's we will obviously welcome feedback or issues, bugs. We want, if something is broken on those, yes, we will fix it, but it's not the priority.
OK， 就是如果大家在以后尝试的过程中遇到什么 bug 要拷打我们的话也没有问题，只是不一定会在我们的最高的优先级上面。
就是我们现在就是有一些项目，它就是说，比如说它原来是用一些 WinForm 或者是 WPF 做，但是现在有很多项目，它采用的一个形式是就是用那个 WebView 加上一个 Web 的一个方式来进行一个前端界面的一个开发。我想问一下，就是这个就是说我们现在在讲的这个。Avalonia 它与这个就是用这个 WebView 用 Web 方式来进行一个开发的话，这两者之间就是我们的这个 Avalonia 它有什么就是它相比于这个 WebView Talk Web 它会有一些什么优势，或者是和一些就是优势和弊端。
Okay, so the question is about because recently. They have some applications built with WinForm and WPF with WebView embedded. And if we want to migrate to Avalonia also with WebView or native Avalonia apps, so is there any advantages or disadvantages
For this specifically, or like for how it's ported, or
maybe performance-wise or application-wise? Yeah.
I would say if you're taking an existing WPF application and you want to port it to Avalonia, I would say port it straight to Avalonia. If you can do that, it makes the most sense. Yeah, I would say this project makes more sense if you already have an existing Maui app and you want it to run on other platforms rather than porting an existing application to Maui to then run with this.
Okay.
You can do it, but I would discourage it. If you have an existing application written in something else entirely, if you can just go straight to Avalonia, it makes way more sense than doing anything else. For WebView specifically, I would say for this project, that's one consideration we have to figure out is what to do with the WebView because Maui supports a WebView, and this project does not bind it currently. We're trying to figure out what avenues that makes sense for. Like WebAssembly probably doesn't make sense, but we're trying to see what to do. But yeah, I would say generally speaking, if you have an existing application, go straight to Avalonia if you can do that.
总的来说，就是如果你是一个已经现成的 WPF 应用的话，迁移到 Avalonia 原生肯定是最好的。那至于 WebView 的话，猫易这个项目本身也是我们学习 WebView 的一个机会，因为猫易本身是支持 WebView 很好的，所以我们也需要从这个项目去了解，怎么样能把 WebView 这个更好的在 Avalonia 当中实现。Okay, I think this is more a question for me, maybe. 就关于 WebView 的问题，我想我可以稍微解答一下。就是怎么说呢？首先你要明白为什么要选择 Avalonia 作为这个壳子，因为有很多框架都可以做 WebView。你不应该关心的是 WebView 能不能做好，因为比如说像 Tauri 或者是就类似这样的框架嘛。这本身就是 Web 基于 Web 的。如果你想显示 UI 的话，这些框架肯定是更好的选择。如果你选择用 Avalonia 做一个壳的话，你要明白自己为什么需要这个壳，这个对于你来说是更需要解答的问题。如果你需要的是 native 的空间的交互的话，那么这个东西跟 Avalonia 作为一个 UI 框架是没有关系的，因为它是系统级的功能。比如说我们会有猫易3授这样的库去做这样的交互。
And just one more point. I mean, I obviously don't know what you were saying, but just to say, because I was thinking about it too, and that based on context clues, maybe I have an idea. Is if Maui Maui has native WebView controls for various platforms, and so theoretically, once we can figure out how to do Avalonia on Maui, on Android or iOS or whatever, we can use their web views and just bring them in. And so if it already has an existing handler, that's why we're trying to say, like, trying to mix and match native versus non, like, we want to use both for platforms that can. For the stuff like Linux, that's where it's complicated because what exactly do you want to target? GTK WebKit? You could, like, but now we have to figure out, like, okay, does that make sense and how do we deliver it? That is an open question, we don't know. But for the platforms that have native web views in Maui already, you can bring them in and they should work fine.
就是刚才我们有说过，就是where is start?
Native web views.
如果这个平台有 native 的 web view 的话，那对于我们来说，我们确实是需要学习猫易，把他们这个更好的这个 web view 的空间拿到 Avalonia 这边来。但是对于像 Linux 这样的平台，究竟什么是 native 的 web view 本身就是一个 open question， 所以我们在这方面也需要做更多的研究。